It was supposed to be a good day. A big day. I had it all planned out. I'd been saving up for months for the perfect engagement ring, working extra hours to make sure I could afford it, and I was going to surprise Claire when I came home early from work. It felt like everything was falling into place. I imagined the smile on her face when I asked her to marry me, how happy she'd be. But nothing prepared me for what I walked into. When I opened the door to the house, everything seemed off. The TV was on, but there was a faint smell of perfume that wasn't Claire's. I thought maybe it was just my nerves, but then I heard laughter. A man's laugh. That's when I felt that cold knot in my stomach. I stepped into the living room and froze. There she was, sitting on the couch with some guy I didn't recognize, his arm too casually draped over her shoulders. Claire was laughing at something he said, her body leaning in way too close to him. They looked comfortable. It took a second for it to sink in, but when it did, I couldn't believe it. Claire, my fiancée, was sitting there with another man. I felt the ground shift beneath me, but I didn't say anything right away. I just stood there, staring at them. When Claire noticed me, her eyes widened for a split second, and she jumped up like she was caught. Jason, the guy, didn't even blink. He just looked at me with this smug little smile, like he'd already won. "Oh, John, you're home early," Claire said, her voice too bright, too fake. "This is Jason, a friend from work." I could feel my heart sink, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of getting a rise out of me. I looked at him and then back at her. "A friend? Really?" She tried to laugh it off, but I wasn't having it. "I can see what's going on here, Claire. Don't lie to me." She looked shocked, like I was the one who was being unreasonable. "It's not what you think. We're just friends, I swear." But I knew. I'd been feeling the distance between us for months, but seeing it, right in front of me, it hit different. "I don't want to hear it," I said, my voice cold. "This is over." Her face fell for a second, but then she quickly shifted to damage control. "John, please. You don't understand. I want more. I'm bored. I need something different." Something snapped in me. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, was telling me she was bored. I felt rage, but mostly just betrayal. I'd been planning to ask her to marry me today, and here she was, throwing it all away for some guy she barely knew. "You want to open up our relationship, right?" I asked, voice shaking with disbelief. "That what you want?" She nodded, like it was no big deal. "Yeah, I think it could work. We'd both get what we need." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. "Then it's over," I said firmly. "You want him? Go. I'm done." Claire just looked at me for a moment, as if processing it. Then she grabbed her bag, gave Jason a glance, and started heading for the door. She didn't fight for us. Didn't beg. Nothing. She was gone, and just like that, I knew there was no coming back from this. I stood there in the living room, still trying to catch my breath. Claire was gone. Just like that. No begging, no pleading for me to understand. She was done, and as much as it stung, I knew she'd made her choice. I thought I'd feel more of a sense of loss, but all I felt was emptiness. It's weird how quickly you can go from loving someone to realizing they don't deserve it anymore. She'd walked out, leaving me standing there with nothing but a quiet, hollow room. I didn't waste time with tears or regrets. I didn't need to. This wasn't some mistake. She didn't slip up. No, she'd been planning this. And I was done being the guy who just lets things happen to him. So, I took control. I grabbed my phone and filed for divorce that same night. No waiting. No hoping she'd change her mind. She'd chosen Jason over me, and that was it. I didn't want a second of her back. The hardest part wasn't the paperwork. It was the realization that someone I'd shared so much with, the woman I'd pictured spending my life with, was capable of lying to me this badly. She had a whole other life going on. The lies, the sneaking around. None of it surprised me anymore. But damn, it hurt. By the time I was finished with the divorce papers, it was late. I couldn't sleep, but I wasn't in the mood to stay in the house either. So I grabbed my keys and went for a drive. I needed to think. On the way back, I started drafting the letter. To Claire's family. I didn't want anything from them. No sympathy, no I'm sorries. They'd all known her, seen her as the good girl, the one who played by the rules. But now, they had to know what their daughter, their sister, had done. I wasn't going to be the only one left in the dark. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I told them the truth. Claire had been cheating, and she wasn't sorry about it. I included the divorce papers for them to see, a little reminder of the choice she'd made. I didn't stop there though. I attached the photo of Claire and Jason from just a few days earlier, the one where she was kissing him, while she'd been telling me everything was innocent. I figured they deserved to know. I didn't care what Claire thought about it. The damage was done, and she wasn't going to take me down with her. The next morning, I woke up to an empty house. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just rid of her. I was free. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't trying to make her suffer. But I wanted her to see that there were consequences. And I knew she would. When she tried to get back into my life, she'd find nothing but an empty house and a letter explaining why I was done. The ball was in her court now, and I wasn't waiting around for her to make a move. A few days passed, and I did what I had to do. I filed for divorce and kept moving forward. Claire was gone, and I wasn't about to sit around moping over someone who clearly didn't care. But that didn't stop the hurt from creeping in when I least expected it. I didn't hear from Claire at all, not even a text or a phone call. And honestly, I didn't expect one. She was too busy with Jason. But then, I got an unexpected call from her mother. Her voice was shaky, and I could tell she didn't know what had happened. "John, did Claire really leave you for this guy?" I sighed, not wanting to explain everything. "She made her choice," I said, trying to keep it short. I wasn't looking for sympathy, and I wasn't about to drag it out. But Claire's mom wasn't ready to let go. She asked if I'd talked to Claire, if I'd given her a chance to explain. I didn't want her explanation. "It's done," I said, and hung up. A few days later, I saw a news story that caught my attention. Claire and Jason had been in a car accident. Jason was in critical condition, but Claire only had minor injuries. At first, I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to feel bad for her, but the other part, the part that had been betrayed, just couldn't. It wasn't that I wanted harm to come to her, but I couldn't deny the twisted feeling that crept in. Claire had wanted freedom, and now she had it, along with the mess that came with it. Life didn't always give us what we expect, and it wasn't my job to fix her. I didn't reach out to her. I didn't send a text or call to check in. I was done. She'd made her choice, and it wasn't me. A few weeks later, I left for Dubai. It wasn't about running away. It was about moving on. I'd met someone new, someone who appreciated me. No lies. No games. It felt like a fresh start, a chance to rebuild my life without the shadow of betrayal hanging over me. When Claire returned from the hospital and tried to reach me, all she found was an empty house. My stuff was gone. No note. No explanation. Just an empty space where everything we had once built together had been. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was just done. It wasn't about revenge. It was about living my life without the weight of her lies. And as for Claire, she'd have to figure out the mess she'd made on her own. The first few days in Dubai were a blur of new faces, new places, and a new sense of freedom. I'd been to the city a few times for work, but this time it felt different. It wasn't just a business trip. This was me starting over, shedding the weight of everything that had happened. I was done with the past. I'd barely been settled in when I got an email from Claire. It was short, almost too casual, like she was trying to sound nonchalant. "John, I know I messed up. I need to talk. Can we please meet? I need closure." I stared at the screen for a few moments, the words sinking in. Closure? It was laughable. There was no closure for her to give me. She'd already taken everything. My trust, my time, my loyalty, and thrown it all away. Now she wanted closure? I didn't respond. I just deleted the email. It wasn't like I hated her. I didn't want her to suffer. But I was done playing the fool. I had nothing left to say to her. What more could she possibly offer me after everything she'd done? She'd chosen Jason, and now she had to live with it. A few days later, I heard from one of my old friends back home. He'd seen Claire on social media, and apparently, she'd been trying to make it seem like nothing was wrong. She posted some picture of herself and Jason at a beach, smiling like they were the happiest couple in the world. I couldn't help but feel a little sick to my stomach when I saw it. It was all an act. But it wasn't my problem anymore. I thought about responding, about maybe letting her know that I wasn't going to be waiting around, but I stopped myself. She didn't deserve that. She'd made her choice, and I'd made mine. Then one day, out of the blue, I got a call from her. I'd been busy with work and trying to adjust to life in a new country, so I wasn't in the mood to pick up. But for some reason I did. Maybe I thought it'd be something important. Maybe I thought I'd hear the apology I was never going to get. "John, please," Claire said, her voice shaky. "I need to talk to you. I'm sorry. I made a huge mistake." It felt so hollow, like she was just going through the motions. I didn't even respond at first. I just let the silence hang there between us. She kept talking, trying to explain herself, but I couldn't even hear her. All I could think was how quickly she'd walked away from everything, how easily she'd thrown me aside. "I'm not that guy anymore, Claire," I finally said, cutting her off. "You made your decision. I'm not going to be your safety net when things don't work out. I'm done." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her trying to process it, like she thought I might cave. But I wasn't going to. I wasn't going back. "I'm not the same person you left behind," I said, my voice steady. "And I'm not interested in hearing your excuses." I hung up before she could respond. That was it. No more back and forth. No more trying to figure out why she did what she did. She had her chance, and she'd blown it. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel angry, either. I just felt free. It was the first time in a long time that I truly felt like I was moving forward, and that was enough. Claire would have to live with the choices she made. I wasn't going to carry her weight anymore. Work was going well, and I was meeting new people. I hadn't even been here a month, but it felt like I was finally starting to move past everything with Claire. It wasn't that I'd completely forgotten her, but I wasn't haunted by her anymore. I was just living. Then came the message. It was from Claire's Facebook, a post tagging me in a throwback picture of us from a trip to Paris. We were standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, laughing like we had the world at our feet. I hadn't thought about that trip in ages, but seeing it now, it hit me differently. I miss the good times. I miss us. At first, I just stared at the screen, trying to figure out what she was thinking. She knew I was done. She knew everything. And yet, there she was, trying to pull me back into her world with some nostalgic photo. I couldn't let it get to me. I was done. So, I blocked her, on Facebook, Instagram, everything. I wasn't going to play this game anymore. She had her shot, and she'd blown it. But then, a few days later, I got a message from one of her old friends. It wasn't unexpected, but it still annoyed me. The message read, "Hey John, I don't know what's going on, but Claire's not doing well. She wants to talk. I think you should reach out." I didn't even need to think about it. I didn't reply. I wasn't her safety net. She had her chance to fix things, and she chose Jason. Now, she had to deal with the fallout. The next few days were quiet, and I started to feel like I could really move on. Then came the message that really threw me. It was from Claire's mom. "John, I'm so sorry to bother you, but you need to know something. It's about Claire. Jason. He didn't make it. He passed away from the accident." I read it over a few times. Jason was dead. And Claire was left with the wreckage of her own decisions. I didn't feel relief, or any satisfaction. But I couldn't ignore the weight of it. Jason had been the escape for Claire, the freedom she thought she wanted. And now he was gone, leaving her to face everything she'd turned her back on. It wasn't like I wanted her to suffer. But it was hard not to feel that she deserved to face the consequences of what she had done. She had chosen Jason, thinking he'd make her happy. Now, she had nothing. I wasn't going to reach out. I wasn't going to let her drag me back into her mess. But I did think about what it must be like for her now. A life built on lies, now shattered. It was a hard thing to process, but at the end of the day, it wasn't my problem anymore. I had moved on, and I wasn't going to let her broken pieces ruin the life I was building. Life in Dubai had become my escape. New city, new people, and a fresh start. I wasn't looking back anymore. I'd met Layla. She was calm, grounded, nothing like Claire. With her, I felt seen for the first time in a long while, and I liked it. No drama, no lies. Just something real. But Claire kept showing up in the background. Through mutual friends, I'd hear how she was struggling without me, how she missed the old days. Part of me wanted to care, but I didn't. Then came a message from her. John, I don't know what to do. I messed up. Jason's gone, and I'm alone. Please, can we talk? I need closure. I stared at it for a while. Part of me thought about responding, but I didn't. I wasn't her therapist. I wasn't her fallback guy. I deleted it. A few days later, I ran into her. Completely by accident. I was getting coffee when I heard my name. John? I turned, and there she was. Claire. She looked different. Smaller. Drained. But seeing her didn't bring back any of the anger I thought it would. I felt nothing. Hey, I said, trying to keep it casual. How've you been? She opened her mouth, but I cut her off before she could say anything. I'm done, Claire. I've moved on. You should too. Her face fell, like she didn't know what to say. After a long, awkward silence, she finally spoke. I guess I'll go, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Yeah, take care. And that was it. She turned and left, and I felt nothing. It was like we were two strangers who'd never known each other. I didn't need her closure. I didn't need her at all. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was just done. Completely and utterly done. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet settled in. Life in Dubai felt like a dream. The city pulsed with energy, and I was finally starting to feel like I belonged. There were no reminders of Claire, no whispers about her or Jason, no photos on social media that made my stomach twist. I was free. I had enough on my plate, work was demanding, and I'd found a new group of people who didn't know my past, didn't ask questions about what went wrong with Claire. It was just easier to keep moving forward. No one here knew the mess I'd left behind, and I liked it that way. But then, out of nowhere, I heard something that pulled me right back into the past. It was from a mutual friend back home. We'd stayed in touch casually, but this message was different. It was a link to an article. The headline read, "Former couple in tragic accident. One dead, one seriously injured." At first, I didn't make the connection. But then I saw the names, Claire and Jason. Jason had died in the crash. Claire was in the hospital, badly hurt but alive. My first reaction wasn't relief or anger. It was just a numb sort of disbelief. She'd chosen him over me, thrown everything away for some idea of freedom. And now he was gone. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not at first. The news felt surreal. But the longer I sat with it, the clearer it became. Claire had been chasing something. Freedom, excitement, whatever. And in the end, she had nothing to show for it. No Jason. No me. Just her mistakes, now laid bare. I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't even feel pity. I just felt like I'd dodged a bullet. She'd been so sure of what she wanted, so sure she was doing the right thing. And now, it was all gone. I didn't reach out. I didn't check in. I didn't try to help. I was done with the past, and I wasn't about to open that door again. If Claire ever came looking for me, I wasn't going to be there. I'd already made that clear. A few days passed, and I heard more about Claire's condition. She was recovering, but things were never going to be the same for her. Jason was gone. The life she'd built with him was over. And I couldn't help but think she deserved it. Not because I wanted revenge, but because she needed to face the reality of what she'd done. It was her choice, after all. She'd chosen him. She'd chosen freedom. And now, she was left with nothing. For me, I had everything I needed right where I was. A new life. A fresh start. The past, with all its mistakes and betrayals, was just that, the past. And I wasn't going to drag it into my future. Claire had made her bed, and I had no intention of lying in it. The weeks rolled by, and I continued to live my life in Dubai. Work was good, I was making new friends, and things were starting to feel stable again. I'd stopped checking in on Claire's updates through mutual contacts. Honestly, I didn't care how she was recovering. She made her choices, and I was moving on. It was as simple as that. But the strange thing was, every now and then, I'd get a text, an email, a Facebook message. It was always from one of her family members or old friends. They'd drop hints about Claire's struggle, asking if I was sure I didn't want to talk to her, or offering condolences for everything that had happened. I ignored them all. One night, I was sitting in a bar with some coworkers, just winding down after a long week, when I got another message from Claire's mom. I wasn't in the mood for it, but something about the tone made me open it. "John, I don't know if you still care at all, but Claire has been asking about you non-stop. I know what happened between you two, but she's going through a really hard time. She's asking for your forgiveness. Please, she needs to hear from you." I stared at the message for a while. Part of me wanted to respond, tell her mom exactly where she could stick her sympathy. But I didn't. Instead, I put my phone down and went back to my conversation with my colleagues. In that moment, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't even frustrated. I just didn't care. There was nothing left for me in the past. No part of me wanted to go back and pick up the pieces. Not for Claire. Not for her family. I'd built a new life, and it was a life without them in it. The next few weeks went by without a hitch. I focused on work, spent more time with Layla, and kept making plans for the future. I didn't need to check in on Claire, didn't need to wonder how she was doing. Her world had crumbled, and it wasn't my responsibility to fix it. Then one day, out of nowhere, I got an email. It was a message from Claire. I hadn't heard from her directly in months, and I wasn't expecting this at all. "John, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to say this. I was wrong. I know I hurt you, and I know I can never make it right. I've lost everything. Jason, my future, even the person I thought I was. I miss you. I'm sorry. I just want to apologize. I'll always regret what I did to you." I read it through once, twice, even 3 times. I didn't feel anything. No anger, no resentment, just a quiet acceptance of the fact that I was done. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need anything from her. I typed out a quick response. "It's too late, Claire. I've moved on. You need to do the same." I hit send. Then, I deleted her email. That was the last communication we ever had. It was over. Completely. I thought about it for a while after, but the thought didn't linger. I realized that my life wasn't going to change based on her regret. I didn't need her to apologize to move forward. I had already moved on, months ago. Claire had done what she needed to do. She'd made her choices. And now, she had to live with them. And as for me, I was looking ahead. No more turning back. A couple of months had passed since the last email. Life in Dubai had become normal. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. I had everything I needed. A job that challenged me, friends who were genuinely good people, and a relationship with Layla that was steady and uncomplicated. It wasn't perfect, but it felt real, and it felt like the kind of relationship I could build something long-term on. I was content. Maybe for the first time in years. But every now and then, something would remind me of the life I'd left behind. Maybe it was a song that Claire used to play on repeat, or a place we used to visit when we traveled together. It didn't happen often, but when it did, the sting wasn't as sharp anymore. I could feel the ghost of her, but it didn't haunt me. It was like I had finally let go, like I could look back and accept what happened without it destroying me. One evening, Layla and I were at a restaurant, having dinner. It was quiet, the kind of night where we were just enjoying each other's company. The phone buzzed on the table, breaking the calm, and I glanced at it, expecting it to be a work email or something from a friend. Instead, it was a message from my lawyer. "The divorce papers have been finalized. You're officially free." The words hit me harder than I expected. The reality of it, the finality, was something I hadn't fully processed until that moment. I had known it was coming, had expected it, but now that it was done, it felt like a weight lifted off me. It was over. No more unfinished business, no more unanswered questions, no more dragging it out. The end had been a long time coming, but now it was official. Layla saw my reaction, and asked, "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, looking up from the phone. I just got the final papers. The divorce is done." She smiled gently, a small understanding look in her eyes. "You good with it?" I nodded. "I'm good. It's been a long time coming, but it's done. And I'm done with it." I think she knew the weight of it. She didn't press me for more details, just gave me space to process, like she always did. We finished our dinner, talking about everything but Claire. About life in Dubai, about the future, about the new plans we had coming up. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. When we left the restaurant, I felt a quiet sense of peace. The door to that chapter was closed. There was no unfinished business, no lingering thoughts. What Claire had done, what had happened between us, it was part of the past. I wasn't going to live in it anymore. I didn't need to. As I lay in bed later that night, I thought about the life I was building now. It felt like a new beginning in every sense. I wasn't weighed down by the past, by the lies or betrayal. I was free, truly free. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need for any more closure. It wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about making peace with Claire or what she'd done. It was about me, and the life I was creating. That was enough. It was over. And I was finally ready to move forward. The days after the divorce felt lighter, like I was shedding a skin I didn't even realize I'd been wearing. Dubai was starting to feel like home, and Layla and I were finding our rhythm. There were no expectations, no baggage, just two people enjoying life without all the drama. It was easy. Every now and then, something would remind me of Claire, an old song, a passing thought, but it was always fleeting. The anger, the hurt, it had faded. I didn't need to forgive her. I didn't even need to think about her anymore. She was the past. I was done. Then, one evening, I got a message from an old friend. He told me Claire had reached out to him, still struggling, still blaming herself, and apparently, she wanted to talk to me again. I didn't feel anything. No anger. No guilt. Just nothing. It was over. I wasn't reopening that door. She'd had her chance, and I'd moved on. The next day, at lunch, Layla asked, "Has Claire tried reaching out again?" I could see the concern in her eyes, but I just shook my head. "Yeah, but it doesn't matter. I'm done with all that." Layla smiled, relieved. "Good. You deserve to move on." I appreciated her for that. She knew where I was coming from. Claire's attempts at contact didn't change anything. I wasn't interested in revisiting that chapter. It was closed. That night, I took a long walk through the city. The quiet streets gave me time to reflect. Claire's name came to mind once, but it felt distant, like a story that didn't belong to me anymore. I didn't need an apology from her. I didn't need her regret. I had everything I needed right here. When I got home, I felt free, completely, ready for the future, ready to leave the past where it belonged. I was done looking back. Life kept moving forward. It wasn't like some dramatic movie where every day felt like a battle, but there was something liberating about it all. I'd spent so long letting the past shape my decisions, letting Claire's betrayal hang over me, but now I was in charge of my own story. Work was going well, challenging but rewarding, and Layla and I were closer than ever. We spent weekends exploring the city, and nights just enjoying each other's company. There were no secrets, no trust issues. I could be myself without the weight of a past that had once haunted me, but Claire still seemed to pop up every so often. Not physically, but through the people who still cared about her. I'd hear bits and pieces through mutual friends, how she was still struggling, how she was trying to piece her life back together. At first, it bothered me a little, but I quickly realized it didn't change anything. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. Then, one night, I got a message from her brother. I hadn't heard from him in months. He was always a decent guy, and I'd gotten along with him fine. Hey man, I know you're probably not interested, but Claire's been trying to get her life back on track. She's asked about you a lot. I know it's a lot to ask, but I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk to her. She's really struggling, and maybe some closure could help. I stared at the message. I thought about it for a moment, but the answer was clear. No. I had closure. It wasn't a conversation I needed to have. I had long since accepted that Claire wasn't my responsibility anymore. She had to deal with her own mess. I wasn't going to be the one to clean it up. I didn't even respond. I just deleted the message and moved on with my night. Layla noticed, of course. She always did. You good? She asked, sensing something in my mood. Yeah, I said, putting my phone down. Just people still trying to get me to go back to that chapter. It's done. I'm done with it. She smiled. You've come a long way, you know? I'm proud of you. That meant more than she probably realized. It wasn't just about her, although I did care for her deeply, it was about me. I was proud of myself, too. I'd come out of that wreckage and built something solid, something worth fighting for. I realized something that night. Real freedom wasn't about walking away from the past. It was about having the strength to never look back. And for the first time, I felt like I truly had that freedom. A few more months passed, and I didn't hear anything from Claire. Her name barely even came to mind anymore. In fact, I'd started to think about her less and less, which felt good. Like a weight I hadn't known was there had finally been lifted. Things with Layla were going strong. We had settled into a rhythm that was calm and easy, but still full of excitement. There were no dramatic twists, no trust issues, just a relationship built on mutual respect. I could see a future with her, something I never thought I'd be able to say again after everything with Claire. One evening, Layla and I were walking home from a small cafe when I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. A familiar face in the distance. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But then the figure stepped closer, and there was no denying it. It was Claire. She was standing on the sidewalk, just staring off into space like she was waiting for something, or someone. I felt a rush of emotion I wasn't prepared for. A mixture of surprise, confusion, maybe even anger, but it was all buried beneath a deep sense of indifference. This wasn't the same woman I used to love. The woman I saw now was broken, and I didn't need to be part of her mess anymore. Layla noticed my shift in mood and followed my gaze. Is that? I nodded slowly. Yeah, it's Claire. Layla gave me a tight smile, but I could tell she was feeling the weight of the moment, too. You okay? I didn't even think about it. I just shrugged. Yeah, I'm good. It's just, seeing her, it's like, she's part of a life I don't even recognize anymore. There was a silence between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. I wasn't angry, I wasn't sad. It was just over. Claire caught my eye, and for a split second, we both locked gazes. It wasn't the intense stare we'd shared before, full of unresolved feelings. This time, it was more like we were two strangers who had crossed paths once upon a time. She looked at me, her expression soft but weary. There was no apology in her eyes, no plea for forgiveness. It was just recognition. And then, she turned and walked away. It was over. For real, this time. Not just in words or paperwork, but in every possible way. I stood there for a moment, watching her fade into the distance. I thought about everything we'd been through, all the hurt and betrayal. But none of it seemed to matter anymore. It was like watching an old chapter of a book that I'd already finished. No matter how I looked at it, I wasn't going back. Layla was still by my side, watching me quietly. After a moment, she took my hand and squeezed it. You're strong, she said softly. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I realized how far I'd come. I'm not just strong, I said, feeling a little surprised by the words. I'm free. Layla smiled, and I realized that freedom wasn't about running away from the past. It was about having the courage to leave it behind. And for the first time, I knew I'd done just that. That night, after running into Claire, I didn't feel much of anything. At least, nothing heavy. It wasn't like I expected some big moment of closure or emotion. I didn't need to have a conversation with her or even hear her say sorry. Seeing her was like looking at a distant memory, a part of my past but not part of who I was anymore. Layla and I went home, and we spent the rest of the evening the way we always did, just being together. There was no need to talk about what had happened, because neither of us felt the need to dwell on it. It was done. Claire was a ghost now, a chapter that had already closed itself. The next few days passed in a blur of routine, work, dinners, catching up on the things that mattered. But even amidst the busyness, I had a quiet moment where I realized how much I'd changed. When Claire had first left, I felt like a man completely undone. I'd been shattered, angry, lost. It felt like the end of everything. But now I was building something new. Not just with Layla but with myself. My life was becoming something different than I'd imagined it before. I wasn't defined by betrayal anymore. I wasn't a man looking over his shoulder, waiting for the past to catch up with him. It was a subtle shift, but it was powerful. One night, as Layla and I were sitting on the balcony, watching the lights of the city below, she looked over at me and smiled. "You know, I've never seen you so calm." I didn't know how to respond at first. I thought about it for a moment. It wasn't just that I was calm, it was that I was finally at peace. "I guess I'm just finally comfortable with who I am," I said, a little surprised by my own words. "I'm not waiting for the past to come back. I'm just living." Layla nodded. "You've earned that. You've come a long way." It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It wasn't about getting back at Claire. I didn't need her to feel sorry. I didn't need her to explain herself. I had moved on, and not just in a surface way. My life, the life I had now, was mine, and I wasn't looking back. That night, as we lay in bed, I couldn't help but think about how far I'd come. How I'd gone from a man who'd been drowning in the weight of betrayal to someone who could stand on his own, without fear, without regret. And it wasn't just about moving on from Claire. It was about embracing the person I had become. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living life on my terms. There was no looking back, no unfinished business. There was only the future, and it was mine to create. And I was ready to build something new, something real. Something that wasn't defined by lies, by the past, or by anyone else's mistakes. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, fully, freely, and without apology. Months passed, and though life on the surface seemed stable, I knew it was just a facade. Emily continued her attempts to make things seem normal, showing up at family events, focusing on the kids, and trying to rekindle what we once had. But no matter how hard she tried, it was clear to both of us that the damage was done. I watched her closely. Every gesture she made to smooth over the cracks only reminded me of the betrayal. Her charm, once something I adored, now felt hollow. The woman I had married was still there, but so was the woman who had destroyed the trust we'd built over the years. There were moments where it almost felt real again, watching her laugh with the kids, helping them with their school projects, or cooking dinner together like we used to. But the moments never lasted. There was always a reminder, a ghost of her choices hanging in the air. One evening, we sat in silence after dinner while the kids played in the living room. Emily glanced at me, her expression a mix of hope and weariness. "Andrew," she started hesitantly, "do you think we'll ever get back to how things used to be?" I put down my glass, meeting her eyes. "No, Emily. I don't think we can." Her face fell, but I didn't hold back. "I tried. I've tried to move past it, to forgive. But I can't forget. And I can't live like this anymore." She looked away, biting her lip as tears welled up. "I don't know how to fix this." "You can't," I said simply. "Some things just can't be undone." It wasn't an argument or a confrontation. Just the truth. And for the first time, I saw her accept it. She nodded slowly, wiping at her tears. "What do we do now?" she whispered. "We do what's best for the kids," I said firmly. "They're the priority. We can work out the rest, but we both know this marriage is over." Emily didn't argue. She didn't plead or make promises she couldn't keep. She just sat there, staring at her hands, as the weight of everything finally sank in. The next few weeks were a blur of difficult conversations and painful decisions. We told the kids together, explaining in the simplest terms that we wouldn't be living together anymore but that we both loved them deeply. Their tears broke my heart, but I knew this was the right path. For me, for them, and even for Emily. The day I moved out, Emily stood at the door, watching as I loaded the last of my things into the car. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic goodbyes. Just a quiet acknowledgement that this chapter was closing. As I drove away, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for what had been lost, but relief for what was finally behind me. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like mine to take. It's funny how life works. One day, you're living in a house full of memories, thinking everything's solid, and the next, you're packing up your things, stepping into the unknown. I'd left the house, left Emily, left all the ghosts that had haunted me for months behind. But it didn't feel like an end. It felt like a beginning. The first few weeks after moving out were tough. Really tough. The silence in my apartment was deafening. No kids running around, no dinner being made, no shared glances across the room. I missed the little things, even the things that had once felt like a routine. But I wasn't going to fool myself anymore. I wasn't going to pretend that everything was fine when it wasn't. I threw myself into work more than ever before. It wasn't about distraction though. It was about rebuilding. I started doing things for myself, things I'd neglected for too long. I went to the gym, signed up for a few classes, started cooking meals that I actually enjoyed. Simple things, but they felt like a reclaiming of my life. And then, slowly, something unexpected happened. I started feeling like me again. The man who'd been buried under a mountain of betrayal, anger, and confusion was starting to resurface. It didn't happen overnight, but little by little, I felt more grounded, more sure of who I was without the weight of the past hanging over me. Then, one Saturday afternoon, I met someone. Her name was Sarah. I didn't expect it, didn't go looking for it, but there she was. We bumped into each other at a local bookstore, both reaching for the same book. We laughed about it, started talking, and before I knew it, we'd spent over an hour chatting about everything and nothing. She wasn't like anyone I'd met before. She wasn't looking to fix me, to make me forget my past. She was just herself. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I could be just me too, with no baggage, no history clouding the moment. It was refreshing. We started seeing each other casually, getting to know each other, and I was amazed at how easy it felt. There was no pressure, no comparison. Just two people, figuring out who they were without the weight of someone else's mistakes. I didn't try to force anything with Sarah. It wasn't about rushing into anything, but for the first time, I felt like I was open to it. Open to moving forward without looking back. I didn't need anyone to fill the hole left by Emily's betrayal. I was whole on my own. But with Sarah, there was something real. The more time we spent together, the more I saw what I had been missing for so long. Not perfection, not some idealized version of love, but honesty, trust, and laughter. The stuff that really mattered. I knew it wasn't fair to compare Sarah to Emily, but I also knew I'd learned what mattered. I wasn't going to settle for anything less than what I deserved. And with Sarah, I didn't feel like I had to. One evening, after a dinner we'd cooked together, we sat on the couch, talking about our lives, our dreams, and everything in between. I looked over at her, feeling a deep sense of peace, something I hadn't felt in a long time. You know, I said, I never imagined I'd be here. I never imagined I could actually feel good again. She smiled softly, a warmth in her eyes. I'm glad you're here, she said simply. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to be real. That was it. That was the truth I'd been searching for all along. Life wasn't about forgetting or pretending. It was about being real, about letting go of the past, forgiving yourself and learning to build something new. For the first time in years, I was starting to believe that happiness wasn't something I had to chase. It was something I could create, right here, right now, with people who respected me, with people who cared. The past had shaped me, sure, but it didn't define me. And the future? It was all mine to create. With Sarah, with my new life, with the lessons I'd learned along the way, I was finally ready to live again. And this time, I was going to make it count.